What's up, YouTube? Josh Sundquist here. I am going to read you my book. Well, not the whole book. Some of my book. A couple pages of Love at First Sight, my debut novel, which comes out in bookstores on January 3rd. Thank you for joining this live broadcast. After I read from it, I will answer some questions, hopefully in the comments. So if anything pops into your mind, put it in the comments, and we'll talk about it maybe in a few minutes. So yeah, I'm going to read for you a few pages from chapter 1 of the book. If you like chapter 1 and want to hear more, I have a pre-order perk campaign going on right now, wherein if you pre-order the book before this Saturday, so you have 2 more days to do this, you will get a link to an unlisted video in which I read all of chapter 1. It's a very long reading because I have a lot of asides, as I'm sure I will when I read this for you. So it's like a 43-minute video. So you can get that. There's a couple other perks. I'll talk about them more later. But you can also get an ebook of unpublished short stories by me, a personal vlog from me to you, and a Venn diagram about yourself. So if you want more information about that, in the meantime, go to loveandfirstsight.com, or I tried to put a card on this video. I'm not sure if it'll work. It's like the upper right corner. No, I guess it's like this corner. I'm not sure if there's an eye there or not. If there is, you can click that. If there's not, there's a link in the underbar to loveandfirstsight.com. Cool. All right. So those are pre-order perks. Now I shall read to you from the book. So if you're new around here, I've written a couple books. One of them is called Just Don't Fall. Just Don't Fall. So that's embarrassing. Now you know that I'm wearing sweatpants, just like sitting at home in my loungewear. I'd planned on this being a chest up only shot. If I had known, I would have worn cooler pants. But anyway, this is my book from 2010, Just Don't Fall. It's a memoir about my childhood and how I lost my leg and such. And then this is a book that came out 2 years ago called We Should Hang Out Sometime. It is a memoir about all of my dating disasters as an adolescent. Also nonfiction, unfortunately. And this is fiction. It is made up. It is a book of lies. Things that came from my imagination and are now printed in a book. So this is the first copy that I've gotten, but it'll be in bookstores in a couple weeks. And it is a story about a teenager who is blind, and he has an experimental operation to gain sight for the first time. And when he does, he discovers that his friends have been keeping a secret about the sighted, or I guess about the visual world from him. That is, his friends have been keeping a secret about something that he was previously unable to see. And then it's about, what happens after that. And also it's about like sight and seeing for the first time, and about the way we process the visual things around us, and also just the way that we process like sensory input. That's really, to me, what this story is about. And ostensibly it's about a guy who's blind, and it's written in his voice, and so like thematically there's a lot of stuff about sort of disability and blindness in it, but to me it's not so much a book to change the way you look at or change the way you think about people who can't see. It's to change the way you think about what you see. Yeah, that's a good phrase. I should write that down. It's not a book about it's not a book to change the way you think about people who can't see. It's to change the way you think about how you see and what you see. Cool. All right. Note to self. Great phrase. All right. So our protagonist, well, I guess I'm going to start from the very beginning. So I don't really need to tell you anything. It's not like there's stuff that you should have caught up on. So I'll read you a few bits here from chapter 1 at the very start of the book. I shall attempt to use different voices for ancillary characters. That will probably go poorly. It usually does. So chapter 1, boom, right there. Boom, here we go. Vice Principal Larry Johnston extends his hand. To clarify, I don't see this. I hear the swish of his shirt sleeve. Nice to meet you, William. The fabric sound plays again, the hand retracting. I'm sorry, I guess you can't do that now, can you? You probably want to feel my face? He grabs my arm and smacks my palm against his cheek, knocking me off balance, so I have to step into the musk of his aftershave. Where do you normally start? Eyes, ears, nose, mouth? He shifts my fingers around the front of his face with each suggestion. His skin is rough and pockmarked, like the outside of an orange. No, actually, I don't do that, I say, pulling my hand away. I identify people based on their voices. And also, I add, I can't resist. Yes, he asks, all eager to please. Well, I don't usually touch faces, but I am gifted with a heightened sense of smell that allows me to recognize a person's pheromones, which are concentrated just below the ear. So if you wouldn't mind, I touch my pointer finger to my nose. His excitement drops. Oh, you want to smell my ear? Pheromones are like faces to me, only if it's not too much trouble, sir. He steps close enough that I can feel the heat of his body, which is a signal that A, he is falling for it, sighted people always do, the suckers, and B, I've taken the joke far enough. I don't actually want my nose anywhere near his old guy earwax after all. Sorry, there was a lot of pauses in the reading of that sentence, because like a thing like came up on my computer, like a virus scanning thing, and it distracted me. Yeah, I'm not a good reader. This is one of many reasons why I did not read the audiobook version of Love at First Sight. Like I read the audiobooks for We Should Hang Out Sometime and Just Don't Fall, which I think is really appropriate for a memoir, even if you're not like the best reader, you know, like in terms of like voices and you know, like giving different voices, different characters and stuff. Because like when you're writing, you know, a memoir, the voice of the book that is like the literary voice of the book and the author's audible voice are in theory synonymous, right? They're in theory the same thing. So it makes sense that you want to hear the author's actual physical voice when you're listening to the story on audio. In fiction, less so. Because in fact, if you hear the author, if when you're reading a book, you know, you're thinking a lot about the author, in some ways, that's a big problem for the reading experience, right? Because for fiction to be like, to work, like to be meaningful, you kind of have to suspend disbelief, so to speak. You have to like believe these characters are real, or at least have a feeling as if they were real. But if you are imagining the author like sitting there at his or her computer conjuring up these characters in his or her mind, well, then like it's a little bit harder to suspend disbelief and like believe in the story. Which is to say that if you are listening to an author read their own fiction, like when they read the audiobook, my experience is, unless the author is extraordinarily talented as a reader, which some authors are, it makes it a little bit harder to like believe in their characters and their fiction, because all you hear is like the voice of the author reading the words to you, and then it's like it's a constant reminder that this is not a real story, this is a made up thing. But more importantly, like in a book that has like a lot of dialogue within and accents, it's like you kind of have to be able to do the accents, you kind of have to be able to do like girl voices and have like more than one girl voice. And these are just talents that professional audiobook readers have that I do not have. So I told my publisher like those were my feelings. I was happy to read the audiobook of Love at First Sight if they wanted me to, but like that's not my recommendation. So they did hire an audiobook reader, and it's available. It's on pre-order on audible.com already. So I'm really looking forward to listening to the audiobook, because I think it'll be really interesting to hear like what did the reader, like how did the reader think the voices were going to sound? Like how did the reader hear Mr. Johnston in their mind? And because I assume it will be different than the voice like I imagine, which I just think that'll be really fascinating. So there is a little aside for you. Okay, so anyway, sorry, like interrupted right in the middle of this anecdote. I've ruined the anecdote now with my long commentary about whether authors should read fiction of their own fiction on audio. So anyway, Will had just told Mr. Johnston that Mr. Johnston was like doing the classic thing that people do, like, this is like one of the things that I wanted to make fun of. And this is probably the way in which Will, the protagonist, is most similar to me. In that, like, I think it's really interesting just the ways people react to me as an amputee, like just things that people always like think or make assumptions about, and then do, that are kind of funny. And so in trying to learn about the experience of being a blind person, I wanted to like find those similar things that people always do when they're interacting with a blind person, that like a person who's blind over time is like, okay, it's this again. And I think one of those things is like that some people believe that like every blind person, certainly some blind people would, but that every person who's like blind or visually impaired wants to like touch people's faces. And like when they touch their face, they like know what they look like by touch. And there's some people want to do that, but like some people are, and I feel like I would be this way, like I don't necessarily want to touch everyone's face. I don't have a need to touch everyone's face. And I think like listening to their voices would probably be sufficient for me. So anyway, Mr. Johnson's like, grabs Will's hand. He's like, do you want to touch my face? And Will's like, no, I want to smell your ear. And then, and that's the funny thing, is like that people will, and this is something I don't do, I did when I was younger, actually, like when I was like Will's age, kind of like push people into, deliberately kind of prank people, like push them into uncomfortable situations. Like I always used to just like, be walking along on my crutches and just fall. I would just like trip really dramatically, like roll over and like throw my crutches up in the air, just because people would flip, like we're so like, oh, what's that? Like just flipped out. So I try not to do that kind of stuff anymore, because I feel like generally people have really good will and are in good intentions in their accommodations for people with disabilities, and I don't want to take advantage of that. Will, however, does not have such qualms, and so he's like, he knows like if a blind person says like, oh, like to get to know you, I need to smell your ear, an accommodating kind of person like the principal is going to be like, okay, if that's what you really want. So that's what he just did. I'm trying to like transition us back into the story now. So now Will says, Mr. Johnston, I'm kidding. I hold up a hand to stop him. It sinks deep into fat rolls, presumably around his midsection. I hope. A joke, sir. I don't want to smell your ear. When I pull my hand away, I wonder if it leaves a visible handprint or even fingerprints in his squishy flesh. I've heard that happens when you press an open palm against a soft surface like sand, dough, or wet paint. Oh, right, yes. He lets out a forced chuckle that sounds like a wheezy smoker's cough. I don't know, something like that. A joke. Yes, very funny. Mr. Johnston's voice is deep and grisly, which is nothing like the voice I'm doing. I feel like the voice I'm doing is like high and pressurized. Deep and grisly. Anyway, I'll just keep doing the same voice. Let's pretend that there's not description of what his voice sounds like. Mr. Johnston's voice is deep and grisly. Sometimes. If you listen carefully, sometimes I added. It's not in the book, to be clear. Yeah. Mr. Johnston's voice, here's the third attempt to read the sentence, is deep and grisly. If you listen carefully, you learn that a particular set of vocal cords produces audio vibrations unlike any other in the world. Voices are the fingerprints of sound. Should we head to your first class? He asks. He grabs my arm from behind and starts to push me out the front of the office. I'm sure he thinks it's helpful to lead me like that, but I instinctively swap our positions, so I am holding his arm instead. I prefer to walk like this, I say. Now I'm in control. I can let go at any time. Yes, all right, that's fine, he says. I've spent most of my 16 years around other blind and visually impaired people, so this is the first time I've actually had to execute a Heinz break in real life. Fortunately, Mrs. Chin made me practice so many times I could do it automatically with Mr. Johnston. The main purpose of this little arm reversal is that it puts me in charge. To put it in dating terms, I can now be the dumper rather than the dumpy. Yeah, dating terms. That's like, I don't know, sometimes when you're writing, you like think of things you heard in English class that like is in literature, and so you're like, yeah, I need that. I need symbolism and metaphor. So I wanted to, because primarily the book is centers around a romantic relationship, but like that doesn't necessarily come through in the first few pages. But I wanted to have like a reference early on to dating, just so you would like start to have that in your mind, and you wouldn't be too worried like, oh no, when is there going to be yes, there's going to be dating. It's because it's in the title. Like in the title, you're like, it's love. Less navigating and talking to the principal, more love, please. To put it in dating terms, I can now be the dumper rather than the dumpy. I've heard the horror stories. Blind people standing on street corners waiting for a crosswalk light to change, only to have a well-meaning but annoying stranger come up from behind, grab their arm, and say, overly loud, of course, because they always assume we are all deaf too, "Let me help you!" and shove them across a street they were not intending to cross. And then the stranger lets go and disappears into the void. You're welcome, leaving the blind person stranded on an unknown street corner. That's a good place to stop. I like that anecdote, or I guess not an anecdote, like example of a story that Will has heard, which of course means it is a thing that I learned in researching the book, which I did a lot of, a tremendous amount. And some of you have heard me talk about this before, but yeah, I've read so many books in preparation for this book. Like pretty much any memoir written by a person with a visual impairment, probably I read it. Probably it's on this bookshelf up here somewhere. In fact, I had so many, like this is, what was it? I think either 3 or 4 years ago, I bought like all the books. Like that's how long this process has been. And so I had all these books, like a bunch of memoirs by people who were blind or visually impaired, but also books like about like orienteering and mobility, like about how a blind person should learn an area, like a new school in this situation. And also books about like the neurology of blindness and case studies, like medical case studies about people who gained sight for the first time later in life. So I had so many of these books, and one time my brother was staying with me. This is like 3 or 4 years ago, and then a couple months after he stayed with me is when I started writing the novel. So that was like 3 years ago maybe, and I was telling him about the subject matter of the novel, and he's like, "Oh, like I'm so glad to hear this. Like I'm so relieved to hear that you're writing a novel where a character is blind, because when I stayed at your house a couple months ago, I saw these books on your shelf, and I was like really worried that you were going blind, and like you were researching it a lot, you know, before you lost your sight, but you hadn't like told anyone about it, like you were keeping it a secret." So I was like, no, that is not the case. I'm just reading a bunch to do research for the book. So anyway, in doing that research, I like heard of this sort of phenomenon happening. That's why the Heinz break was invented, which is a thing where when someone like grabs, if you're blind and someone grabs you kind of from behind and starts to like push you, it's like an arm reversal, like judo, where you swing your arm around and then you're holding the back of their arm, so that if they start to lead you a place you don't want to go, you can just let go. Because like in our society, which is great, like a lot of times if a person, especially who's totally blind, is like in public, and obviously, you know, there's something obvious, like probably they're holding a white cane or something, people, strangers will frequently be like, hey, can I help you? Do you need directions to anywhere? Which is totally great, but sometimes people are like overly helpful and they're just like, let me take you. I'm just assuming you're going this way, so let me take you this way. And then it's like, if you don't, because as a blind person, you kind of like learn routes, and so if you get moved off your route, that can be a big problem because now you just have no idea where you are, and maybe that person just has walked away and you're just left there. So that is what Will is referring to in that situation. So let's see, what should we do now? I guess I should, well, let me explain. I'll answer questions, but let me first explain the perks for pre-ordering, which I mentioned earlier, but I want to actually tell you what they are. So first of all, yeah, if you order, this is all the info is on loveandfirstsight.com, link in the underbar. Oh, I wonder if, I think maybe I can click this thing that says links. Oh, nope, that's a link to this video. Never mind, link's still in the underbar, loveandfirstsight.com. So if you pre-order one book by this Saturday night and you submit that on the forum at loveandfirstsight.com, you will get a video. It is like this, but longer. It's me reading the whole first chapter, and you'll get that more or less immediately so that you don't have to wait until January 3rd to consume more book. And mostly really is just listening to my commentary and comments whenever I make mistakes reading, which is often. If you order 2 or more books, you get that video, but you also get a bunch of other perks. Number 1, you get what is number 1? Oh, a custom vlog. Right, yeah, so it's like a video that I'll make for you. It'll be like a minute or 2 long, and it can be about whatever you want. You can ask me a question, you can ask for advice, you can ask for a shout out, really anything that you want, and I'll talk about it. I'll post it here on my YouTube channel as unlisted, and you'll get an email with the address. That's perk number 1. You get all of these if you order 2 or more books. You get that. Number 2, you will get an ebook. This is the cover that I made for the ebook. Of unpublished short stories. This is like fiction that I've written just in other contexts, 3 short stories that you will get for your ebook, and it's pretty long. It's like 160 pages or 180 pages or something. So it's a substantial amount of fiction that you can be reading until the book comes out on January 3rd. And thirdly, you also get this perk, which is me drawing a Venn diagram about you. Yeah, it'll look kind of like that, except with your name here and your interests or qualities here. So you get all that stuff if you order 2 or more books. And there's kind of a frequently asked questions on there. So if you have questions about the perks that I've just explained to you, it's probably answered on loveandfirstsight.com, but you're also welcome to ask them in the comments. Okay, now I will answer a few questions about the book or any topic that you want when we're hanging out here in this live hangout on air. Look, it's been a really long time since I've done a live video on YouTube. It's fun to be back. I've done a lot of live videos on Facebook recently. If any of you are on Facebook, maybe you've seen them, but not many on YouTube. The reason being that Facebook has a mobile version of Live, which YouTube is really behind on. Twitter has it, Facebook has it, that is, you can go live from your mobile. YouTube still doesn't have this. They're really behind the curve on Live mobile. They have a beta version that a few YouTubers have now. I don't have it yet, so I'm talking into my webcam. All right, cool. Let's see. Questions. All right, which direction does this go? Okay, it goes down or up? Down. Okay, cool. Someone asked, are you in touch with Ralph Green anymore? Ralph is a character, so to speak, but like my friend. He was like my ski buddy in Just Don't Fall. Yeah, sometimes I talk to Ralph, but I also just like watch his videos and like kind of follow him. Like that's his real name. You can Google him and find like his YouTube channel and stuff if you want to know more about Ralph. Okay, how do you feel about llamas? I don't have real strong feelings, Tim, about llamas, but maybe you do if you're asking me, or maybe this is some kind of like inside internet joke that I didn't find out about. Let me know. Randy asks, will you come back to Virginia for a book signing? Probably not. I'm gonna do, if you live in the Los Angeles area, I'm gonna do like a book release or a book launch, which is basically just a book signing, except it's on the day that the book comes out. So that's January 3rd. It'll be in Hollywood at Book Soup, a bookstore there. And probably there's gonna be a signing in Las Vegas later in January, but not a lot of like real life signings. Like my focus is like doing things on the internet. Like this, it's like a virtual book event. I mean, I know it's like cool if we can meet in person, but there's a lot of places in the world, and it's really hard to go to a lot of them because even if you go to like 20 cities, which is a lot for a tour, you've reached, like you've been in driving distance of a tiny fraction of the total interest, like population that might want to come. So that's why I think like the internet is a great tool, and we can have sort of a virtual personal interaction. Like if you want a custom blog, it's kind of like us talking, except we're just talking through a computer. Cool. All right. Can I collaborate with the blind film critic? That's an interesting idea. I'm interested to see how the blind and visually impaired community likes the book. I mean, I hope they do. As I'm sure you can hear from the tone of my voice, I'm nervous about whether they will. I endeavored to create an authentic voice for a person who is blind, with this caveat. Will frequently, so if you if you are totally blind, you're totally born blind, and this is kind of really what a lot of the book is about, is your brain develops fundamentally different than a person who has sight, or a person who has any sight. Now, the vast majority of people who are blind, even legally blind, so to speak, they have some sense of sight, like they can see colors or at least like light and darkness. And people who are totally blind are generally born sighted, and generally they lose their sight due to like an accident or disease or something later in life. Now, that means that it is exceptionally rare to find a person who's totally blind and was born that way. Very, very rare. So there's like some studies on them, and there's like these two researchers in Italy who I read a lot of their stuff, and I like emailed with them about the book. But it's difficult to find a population large enough to like study, to have them in like a statistically significant level kind of study about something. All of this is to say that that's a pretty rare person, and even that kind of person, if they were an adult, they learn, and I know this because like I read like books by people who are totally blind, but they learn by listening. They learn the visual words that you and I use, and so what I use the word like they can write vision or eyesight phonetically, right? Just by hearing what people, how, the words, like the colors, the warm words that people used to describe, say, a sunrise, is like they can like evoke those words because they know that's what people always say about a sunrise. It's orange and it's warm and it moves slowly. Like they can sort of use that language and sound very similar to the way you or I would describe something. So in that sense, Will, and furthermore, when that person was attempting to, well, if that person knew, if there was something that they knew was very visual in its nature, that person would probably just not try to describe that to you because they would know, I cannot accurately describe this to a sighted person, right? So they probably would just not attempt to do so. Whereas Will, because he's not talking to you, it's just in his voice. So we're, so to speak, hearing his actual thoughts. Therefore, you'll hear him make conjecture, like he will guess or make assumptions about how things look. But we, as readers, and even if you were a blind reader, you would maybe, probably a lot of things you would know. Like if you were an adult, you would know if he's making like the incorrect guess about something. So, like for example, in this section we heard just now, when he puts his hand on the principal's stomach and he feels how it's like soft and gooey, and he's heard people say like that some kinds of like soft and gooey things leave like a handprint, like in a sand or in wet dough, and he wonders if there might be a little handprint that's left in the principal's belly. Now, as a sighted person, like I know that's not true, and if you're a sighted person, you know that's not true, and even if you were like partially blind, you probably know that's not true. But Will is just kind of wondering if that's the case, and he just kind of he thinks that, and he might not ever say that because why say something that would reveal a sort of a gap in your understanding. But because we hear his thoughts, we can hear kind of like things that vulnerabilities that he wouldn't otherwise be willing to expose. So that's a really long way of saying, I hope that when blind or visually impaired people read the book, they're able to make that distinction. It's kind of a subtle one, rather than thinking like, this narrator, makes a lot of errors in his judgment, and like, I'm blind and I know more than this narrator does. I'm hoping that that's not the case in terms of how people perceive it. But I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, my goal, like, I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't necessarily trying to write about blindness per se. I wanted to write about perception, and about like beauty, like what do we define as beauty? It becomes like the main theme of the book. And a character who is blind was the best narrative vehicle to do that. So I didn't set out to be like, I want to write the most A+ realistic scientific depiction of a person who's blind. It was, here are the themes I want to explore, and here's the story that would best illuminate those themes, if that makes sense. So kind of the story came before, like, an exact replica of how a 16-year-old blind person might sound in their story. Really long and meandering answer to your question. But anyway, Edward asks, will there be a Braille version? Now, this is a good question. Maybe have you guys seen my the video that I did for Mental Floss? If not, you should check it out. Maybe I can put a link here in the comments. The reason I say this is because I did this this video for Mental Floss, the list show. Let's see if this allows me to post. Oh no. Right. And basically I did, it was like a bunch of stuff that was kind of like from like the research that I did for the book, but stuff that didn't fit into the book because I couldn't, like, my editor was always like, there's too much science and not enough story. Yeah, okay, cool. Let me post it, put on there. So I just posted this link to Mental Floss. Please watch this video. I'm really proud of it and really excited about it, because it was like, my editor was always like, there's too much science, like, take out all these facts. Because I was always trying to like figure out ways to like insert things that I thought were interesting into the story that had nothing to do with the story. So anyway, a lot of the stuff that got like deleted from the book, I made into this Mental Floss video called like 9 myths about blindness, or no, maybe there's more myths than that, like 18 myths about blindness or something. So click on that link. And the reason I'm saying that, to answer your question, you're asking about Braille. Very few books, or relatively few books, are made into Braille. There's several reasons for that. Number one, Braille is super expensive, and it's actually not the go-to reading source for most people who are blind. In fact, a very small percentage of them, because like it's really expensive to buy, because the books are like 10 times longer, so they're really heavy and unwieldy to use. And so unless a book is like especially popular, it's not likely to have a Braille version. Furthermore, with the advent of like audiobooks that are easily available on audible.com or on iTunes, or even from libraries, a lot of times you can just get audiobooks from the library. That is a, I think, more popular medium for people who have vision impairments, is to listen to an audiobook, for relatively inexpensive compared to a Braille book, which is very expensive. So I mean, that would be awesome if there became a Braille edition, like if the way like editions work, like different country editions, or like say like a mass market edition or a book club edition, like those sort of like niche publishers have to like acquire the rights. Like they go to your publisher and they're like, we want to acquire the rights for Braille, and my publisher will be like, great, but like that has to happen first. And so like that, for example, this book will be published like the same way with international rights. So there's an Italian version that comes out pretty soon, and sometime soon there'll be a German version that will, I think, be in Italy and Germany. So like that's like when a publisher who publishes for a specific country comes to your publisher, they're like, we want to publish in this country. Your publisher is like, cool. But until that happens, there's not a way to distribute into those countries, except online. Obviously, you can buy it like bookdepository.com. But like if you live in Czech Republic, there's no edition for that territory, so it won't be in your local bookstore. you'd have to get it online. A lesson for you in book publishing. Cool. Schrodinger's cat asked if I would be reading the audiobook. Actually spoke, if you rewind in this broadcast to maybe like 10 minutes in, I spoke at length about the audiobook. Okay, so a number of you have asked, did I enjoy writing this book more than the nonfiction, or like the comparison between writing nonfiction and fiction? So that's, I think, an interesting question. So to refresh your memory, so I wrote, like, these are two memoirs. They're nonfiction about my life, and then this is a novel. It's fiction. It's made up. So the biggest difference that I noticed is that the editing process is a lot harder. That is, when you're working with your editor. Here's the reason, I think, why it just seems way harder. I think the reason why is because if you write, say, like a chapter, and your editor's like, I don't like this chapter, and you're writing your memoir, and the editor's like, I don't really like this chapter. Well, that's what happened in my life. So if you don't like it, like, we can delete the chapter, but I can't like change the events, because then it would not be nonfiction anymore. So then you just delete the chapter, and the book's a little bit shorter. But in fiction, if your editor's like, I don't really like this chapter, then it's like, well, we could change it to literally anything. Like, how there are infinite possibilities. Like, what could happen? Any of them. Any of the infinite possibilities could happen, and we have to decide what is the best one. So I think the editing becomes it's just a much more difficult process. Now, that's not to say it's unpleasant or necessarily tedious. It's just more difficult. But yeah, obviously there's a tremendous amount more creative freedom in fiction, which, yeah, overall, like, makes it, I guess like kind of more interesting to write. I mean, I haven't written a lot of fiction yet, so I don't know. I can't give you like a lot of information from experience, nor can I say objectively if I'm any good at it. So you'll have to read the book and see. I might just be terrible at it, in which case the information I'm telling you also might not be reflective of the experience of other authors. But I enjoyed it. I mean, like, I'd love to write more fiction. I hope I can, which is basically determined on do people like the book, or well, I mean, and do people buy the book? It's probably first, do people buy the book? That's what allows my publisher to be like, we liked it, it worked, people bought it. We'll publish your next book. So hopefully that happens, and hopefully you guys will pre-order it. If you've been watching this live stream this long, I feel like you're a pretty loyal reader, and probably you are going to pre-order if you haven't already. So thank you in advance for doing that and keeping my fledgling author career alive, or writing career as an author. Cool. Edward says that it's compulsory to learn Braille at his school. That's really interesting and really cool. Yeah, that's awesome. It must be an interesting school. Lillian asks, what tips do you have to give young people who want to write memoirs? Okay, by far the most important tip, well, I mean, this is true of all writing, is practicing, right? But if you're going to try to write a memoir, no question, you immediately should sign off of this live broadcast and start a blog if you don't already have one. Because if you're writing a memoir, it's like what you write in your blog is the same. So it's practice in writing your blog, and that gives you a lot of things. Number one, that's material that could later become part of your memoir. Number two, it gives you practice and exposure to an actual audience, right? You're getting feedback in the comments. You're like, I like this one, I didn't like this, and then you learn, oh, like this, people like when this voice works well for my story, or this voice, doesn't. People find it unpleasant or whatever. And number three, ultimately, when you want to take your memoir to a publisher to try to get published, you have a platform, right? You can tell your publisher, like, I have this blog and these readers that would like to read a book. So like, that's very useful, I think, in differentiating yourself. So start blogging. That is by far my biggest recommendation to you. Do you have the rights? We should hang out sometime. Do you have the rights for We Should Hang Out Sometime in a vid a while back? I don't know what that question means, but thank you for asking it, Wolfie. Cool. What else? Fiona asks, when did you know you wanted to become an author? I wrote several short stories when I was like probably 7. I started writing fiction. Um, and then I guess kind of around the time that I had cancer, I started writing a lot more like nonfiction, just like writing about my experiences, which was natural because like that was what people were really interested in. And then I guess it's kind of taken me 20 years to come back to writing fiction. After I've written 2 books about my life, I've kind of exhausted all of the source of nonfiction. It was like, all right, well, if I want to write more stuff, it's gonna be fiction. It has to be, I have to make some stories up. So yeah, for a really long time, I think I was interested in writing and then also being a writer, like when I grew up. So yeah, I'm really lucky to have that as kind of like a part of my life and career today. Um, all right, what? How did you come up with the cover design? Asks Crystal Yang. So cover designs are really a really interesting and complicated and important part of a book design. As an author, you have way less control over if you sell your book to a publisher. If you self-publish, one of the advantages obviously is you can decide anything you want. But if you sell your book to a publisher, you give up a lot more rights than people typically realize. You have generally the final say over anything like inside the cover. So like any of the text, generally it's up to you if you want to take an editor's advice or not. Most of them they'll pretty much defer to you. Everything else you don't really have final say. They will consult you. They want your opinion. They want you to be happy with the book, your publisher, that is. But ultimately, you are not in control of the title, the subtitle, the cover design, the back cover design, the promotional, like the copy, like that is the description of the book that's here. Very, very little of these elements are you in control of. Sorry, there's like a chainsaw outside. Let me see if my window is open. Wow, it's just really loud. My window's not even open. So all that's to say is like I did not come up with this idea, nor did I design it. I will say like we went through a lot of design concepts along the way, some of which you might have seen, which I think some of them we published. We asked people their opinions at various times. But this is the one we ultimately came to after going through a number of different designs and a number of different designers. I was really happy. I love this cover, and I was really happy that we ended up with both this and the designer. It's actually the same guy who designed We Should Hang Out Sometime. His name's Lee Crutchley. You should follow him on Instagram. He does a lot of cool like handwritten stuff. But if you look carefully, you can see it's the same font, basically for my name. The reason being that's not a font, that's actually his handwriting. So he wrote this one, and then my publisher hired him to design this cover. And I think it's cool because it gives you some continuity, between the books. Like if you see it in a bookstore, I think that's cool when there's like some similarity between books by a given author. So that's a little like insight for you into how we ended up with this cover. Cool. Wolfie asks, how old is Anna now? How old is she? I guess she's 19. She's like a sophomore in college. She is a ballerina. She's a trainee in a ballet company and majoring in dance at Virginia Commonwealth. So that's cool. I'm going to see the whole family next week. We're going to Hawaii because my brother Luke, he saves sea turtles, like little baby sea turtles. He like protects them, and he's like the director of sea turtles for Maui, the island. So we're all going to visit him there next week, or on Saturday actually, in like 2 days. So that should be pretty awesome, and I'll see Anna there. And I'll tell her that you said hi, Wolfie. Thanks for asking. Do I know anyone who's blind? Is the character based off of them? Yes and no. That is, I'm saying yes to the first question, no to the second one. Not like yes and no, I'm not sure if I know anyone who's blind. I've known lots of people over the years who are blind. As a ski racer, when I went to the Paralympics, of course, I met a tremendous number of people with all sorts of different disabilities, many of them being blind. I didn't base, the care, like, I don't like, to me, it would be like it would be sort of insulting if I was like, yeah, I knew a blind guy and I based the character on him, because it's like, that would imply that blindness is the overarching defining trait of like his character, like how he behaves in his personality. Now, from a narrative sense, it's a very important trait, of course, in this particular story, but like it doesn't, how he speaks and like what he's interested in and his feelings, like, I think like those are informed by his blindness, but like that doesn't make up everything about who he is, if that makes sense. So yeah, he's not like based on a person who is blind or something like that. Cool. Randy asks, if you are planning to write another book, do you have any ideas for it? Yeah, I mean, I'm always like developing several different ideas. Actually, I'm so glad you asked that, because I just thought of an idea last night, literally like while I was falling asleep, and then I didn't write it down because I was like, oh, I'll write it down tomorrow, and I forgot about it until you just said that. I'm gonna make a note to myself after this broadcast to write down that idea, novel idea. Cool. Thank you. I've made a note to myself, novel idea. But some of like the sort of not fully developed ideas I have for fiction are in this ebook, Unpublished Short Stories, which you can get, as I said, as a perk. So I would be really interested, actually, if you guys do read it, send me a tweet or an Instagram message or something, and just like let me know like what you thought of them, or if there's any of the short stories that you would like, because they're basically like the setup for a story. It's like the first chapter of a book or something. So if there's any that you're reading, you're like, oh, I really want to see this developed into a full novel, let me know. I'd be really interested, because it very well could be that one of them might become my next book. It is possible. Okay, Schrodinger's cat asked us to post pictures of the sea turtles. Luke, my brother, sometimes posts turtles, but a lot of times he can't post pictures of them because because their job is to kind of protect them both from predators and from humans sometimes, because sometimes humans will come in and like disturb the nests, or inadvertently hurt the turtles. And so a lot of times they don't post pictures because you could kind of look in the picture and figure out where this turtle nest is, and they're kind of trying to keep them a secret. So but if there's any pictures that I can get and I'm allowed to post, I definitely will, because they're sea turtles, they're adorable, obviously everyone loves them. Cool. Schrodinger's cat asks, any New Year's resolutions? I'm trying in 2017 to like, I don't know, just be more chill. It's like what I'm always trying to do. I'm always trying so hard to not try so hard. So it never really works out. Probably because that's my mentality towards it. But yeah, I like to like chill out and just like be more, just appreciate and enjoy like the many wonderful and enjoyable things about my life. Like where we live near the beach, I have so many friends, Ashley around in my life, and I want to like soak that in better in 2017. So let's talk this time next year, and I'll tell you how it went. Favorite Ninja Turtle? I was not allowed to watch Ninja Turtles growing up, and I've not watched the new movie, so I don't know. It seems like they're based on artists, like painters. Is that right? Like Leonardo da Vinci? Is that one of them? I don't know. How are we spending the holidays? Oh, like I said, we're going to Hawaii next week to see Luke, so that should be pretty cool. What is my favorite flavor of ice cream? Mint chocolate chip or any kind of like coffee flavor is my favorite. Schrodinger's cat asks, what if you hate the color and or things that you're not in control of? Yeah, I mean, I'm really lucky that I have an awesome team, and like they're really good at designing things. So I'm really pleased with like the choices that they've made. But that's not uncommon. I mean, that authors have huge feuds with their publisher. It's the publisher's final call. Obviously, they want the author to be happy, but if they think the author is making the wrong choice, well, obviously, like they want to make the choice they think is right. So yeah, those sorts of things happen, and publishers and authors sort of break up because by default you want to stay with the same publisher because like the editor, the in-house sales team, the marketing team, like all these like people that you don't think of that are on a book. Like when I send an email about my book to like all the people that need to know about it, like something about the launch of the book or marketing or something, there'll be like 8 people or 10 people or something on the email. Like those are all the people who mostly work at my publisher who are involved in the book. So there's a lot of people, and it's great if you can stay working with the same people every book, rather than sort of like, if there's a fallout or maybe your editor leaves or something like that, in which case maybe you have to find a new publisher, and then it's like, starting over. It's like starting a new job instead of sort of staying in the same job, if that makes sense. So yeah, my publisher's awesome though. Little Brown for young readers. Well, yeah, you can follow they're called The Novel on social media, NOVL. If you're into books, you can follow them on like Twitter and Instagram and such. They have a cool feed. All right, favorite movie of 2016. Ooh, Oh, that's a good question. I see a lot of movies. I love movies. I just saw like this week, for example, since on Saturday I saw Moana, on Sunday I saw Star Wars, and last night on opening day I saw Assassin's Creed. Yeah, because I love dumb action movies. Anyway, my favorite movie of, I mean, what comes to mind? The Accountant was pretty awesome. The Accountant was definitely up there. It's like the first. I mean, I know that was like a new release, so it's obviously more front of mind for me. But I really liked The Accountant. My favorite book, it always changes. Like obviously, I love John Green stuff. I love The Magicians by Love Grossman. I love Gone Girl, which I know is like really popular, or it became so popular that like people, there's sort of a backlash against it maybe. But I really like Gone Girl. I think it's a really amazing voice. Um, I really like the Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Those are some examples. I would suggest that yeah, I should like I did with like I've done recently with Batman and last year with Harry Potter. I should like go back and experience the Ninja Turtles that my parents prohibited me from consuming when I was a child. Maybe I'll do that. So this okay. Advice. Katie asks, advice for getting halfway through a story and running out of plot. I don't know. I like to outline. My style is like to outline a lot before I write. So that has not happened to me. So I'm not because it's just a different style of writing than so-called discovery writing, which is where you're kind of making the story up as you go along. So I don't know, and I'm not a good person to answer that. But good luck. I hope it goes well. Have I ever been to Houston, Texas? Lots of times. I've given speeches there, so that's cool. I assume you live there. Do you think Snow White is hot? Oh, I read that wrong at first. I read it as, do you think white snow is hot? And I was like, this is a trick question. Snow, by definition, is cold. It's below 32 degrees. It's not hot. Then I read Snow White. I don't know. Do you mean the animated character or like a remake? I'm not sure who we're referring to on this question. I don't know. Do you think Snow White is hot, Rosie? Do you have any pets? Well, we have a cat. It seems like usually when I'm filming a live video, she like wanders in to see what's going on. She hasn't come in yet, but yeah, we have a cat named Scar, like Scar from The Lion King. My voice is starting to get sore, so that signals to me that I've been talking a long time. So I'll answer a few more questions, and then we will end this live stream. So a few more, the ones here at the bottom before I go. And what? Okay, what will happen? A couple of you asked about we should hang out sometime. The movie. So we should hang out sometime. The movie is the draft or the screenplay is in its second draft. I just got a copy of the screenplay like a week ago from the screenwriter. So it's in the studio has it right now. It's like they're reading this draft and like, of course you always hope they'll like it and then they'll like greenlight it and move into production. Will that happen? It's anybody's guess. I am I'm sort of a pessimist about these sorts of things, but I would give it like a 2% chance of happening. I formerly would have given it like a 1 in a million, and then like once the first draft was written, I said like 1%. So I've doubled my chances in my mind from 1% to 2%. It's doubled, but it's still like pretty low in my mind because things it's in development, right? But things don't necessarily move from development into production. That said, I'm reading the script right now. I'm halfway through it. And it's so great. It's so funny. It's so funny. I'm just really, it's really delightful. And Ashley's reading it too. We're reading it like at the same time and kind of slowly, so we don't like read it all at once. So I hope it does because I think it's great, and I'd love for that to become a real thing. I think that would just be so interesting too to watch a movie unfold. But it's not really up to me. So hopefully it will be cool. Wasn't Rogue One amazing? Yeah, it was pretty cool, pretty awesome, and pretty like different for like a Star Wars movie. Would I ever consider coming to Ireland? What do you know about? Yeah, I mean, I go wherever people hire me as far as giving speeches. So if I ever get hired to give a speech, I would love to come for Ireland for that, or on vacation. I've never been to Ireland. Ashley's like family, I guess, is is Irish, so we might. I think she said that, but yeah, I don't know. Their name isn't. It's kind of Irish sounding, but anyway, all this to say is maybe we'll come to Ireland sometime. That would be cool. What do I know about Denmark? Not a lot, to be honest. I mean, like some obvious things about it, but not enough to like answer at length. But maybe you live there? I'm not sure. Was that the whole first chapter? No, that was because I read the whole first chapter for that like video that I did yesterday, and it was just exceedingly long. If you guys watched my Facebook live stream last week, I drew in this and then gave like as proof of that there was this copy, and I'm mailing this probably tomorrow to someone in the comments of that video who won. But it looks like we read up to page 4. So that was like 40%-ish of the first chapter. Cool. What is my writing process? I like, I'm not sure if you mean like sort of planning, but I'll tell you like my writing sort of routine or habits. Number one, like when I'm writing, I'm not writing anything right now because like most of my focus is kind of like I'm getting ready to launch this book. But when I'm in a period of writing, a season of writing, I like to write first thing in the morning, like before I do anything else. I eat breakfast, but I don't allow myself to like check my email, go on my phone, anything until I've done my writing for the day, because I find writing is very difficult, and otherwise I procrastinate. Like there's always something else to do. If I get an email, I need to write the email. Like no, not allowed to do anything until I finish the writing for the day. And then secondly, I think it's really important but hard is editing. Just that is rewriting, reading what you've written and then fixing it. And it takes like a lot of rewrites. Like it depends on the author and their style. Most authors probably do maybe like, I don't know, 3 to 5 rewrites themselves, and then like another 5 or so with their publisher. Patrick Rothfuss, author of Name of the Wind, I met him at VidCon like 2 years ago. He told me he does like 200. He goes through his whole book 200 times before publishing it. So that's why there's so much time in between Patrick Rothfuss books, because he edits them 200 times. So I like to edit as I go, though, which is to say I'll write a page, and then I will read it out loud to edit it, because I feel like you could hear problems with your language choices that you can't necessarily see when you're reading. And so I'll read it and then edit as I go, and I'll do that over and over until I can read the whole page without stopping. That is, without a pause, because I'm like, oh, that sounds wrong. So I can read the whole thing, it all sounds smooth. Then I will allow myself the fun part of writing a new page, because writing, just composing itself is probably the most fun part, but it's like 5% of the battle, because really writing is rewriting, or good writing is rewriting, I would say. Or even more so, I would say good writing is good rewriting. That's probably the most accurate phrase. Cool. All right, trying to push through those of these comments before I finish. Terrified of showing people your work. I mean, if you're terrified, that is, you're a writer and you're terrified of showing people your work. I mean, if you're terrified of people associating with you, obviously I would publish it online, like on a blog, or on, if you're writing like fiction on any of the like sort of free ebook platforms, but under a pseudonym, and then nobody knows it's you. If you're scared of just like the criticism from people directed towards what you wrote, not necessarily directed towards you, yeah, I don't know, that's part of the process. I don't know, start small, like don't write like a whole novel and then ask for advice. If you write a little bit and see if people like it, and if they do, expand that, and then it seems like there's less on the line when people read it and give you their feedback. Yeah, I'll probably do a couple more live streams on the next couple of days, probably on Facebook, maybe Twitter, probably Facebook. How's my relationship with my editor? Awesome, she's great. Yeah, it's the same. I've had actually different editors at different points. I had a different, the editor of We Should Hang Out Sometime left my house, my publishing house, Little Brown. So she left, and then I had a new editor who took over about this time, that is like right before book launch. So Love at First Sight was the first book that she edited of mine, but we had already been working together for a while when she, when she started actually editing something I wrote. But yeah, she's fantastic. So I'm very, very lucky about that. Cool. All right. I feel like I got through most of the questions that you guys asked, and I'm super, super grateful again for you watching, especially if you've been hanging out this whole time and you haven't clicked off yet. That's amazing, and I'm very, very lucky to have you as a viewer. So once again, I've been discussing Love at First Sight, my novel. If you have not pre-ordered, please do so. Like, in all seriousness, my ability or my opportunity to write future books is entirely contingent on like the success of a current book. In this case, me being able to like get published writing future novels is totally based on, do people buy this novel? So I mean, I'm super lucky to have this novel published, but I would love the opportunity to write more novels. To do that, I really need people to buy it, especially to pre-order it. So I'd be very, very grateful if you would do that. And as my way of saying thank you, if you pre-order by this Saturday, go to loveandfirstsight.com, fill out the form, and you get a bunch of perks. I've already mentioned what the perks are, so you probably heard that. But go to loveandfirstsight.com to get more information about the book and about the perks that you can get. I think they're pretty fun. Hopefully you do too. All right, cool. Thanks for being here. I hope also that you're following me on other social media. I post more often, you know, like on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat probably than I do on YouTube. So I hope you're on those places as well, so that we have other places to hang out in between YouTube videos, which sometimes can be a while. All right, I feel like I need some sort of dramatic finish. I'll dramatically finish with a question. The Velvet TV, the most recent question is it a tactical move to publish it before Christmas? This book is being published on January 3rd, so it's not even being published before Christmas. So if it was a tactical move, we failed in the tactics. If you're asking hypothetically for other books, yeah, I mean, obviously by far the most purchases are made in all categories of consumer goods right before Christmas in December. Everyone knows that, and so all of like the biggest brand name authors and publishing houses publish in the fall with the idea of leading up to Christmas. So if you are like a, say, beginning author, like kind of just getting started, like I am, it would be a tough time to compete. Now, this is a decision I don't make. This is entirely up to my publisher, like when it's published. But I think it's a great decision. It's too hard to go up against fall releases and against November releases. So my book is published at the start of January. And it was going to be published later in January, but Barnes & Noble asked for it to be published at like January 3rd with the idea that people who got like gift cards or whatever at Christmas might buy it. So that's why it's at January 3rd. So yeah, there are a lot of like tactics that go into like the date that a book comes out. But they're one of those things, like, you know, with the cover, they like kind of consult with me a lot, but like the release date is not something I have a lot of input on, which is totally fine. Like, you know, I'm happy for the book to come out anytime. But you know, for the publisher and for the distributors, that is like Barnes & Noble, etc., the date that it comes out is you know, it affects them more. It's actually like more important or more significant to them for tactical reasons. So cool. All right, we will finish that. Thanks for watching. Hope that you pre-order. Hope you like the book. Let me know what you think of it. Even if you don't like it, let me know what you think of it. I'm really interested to hear what people have to say. And until the next time I see you, we should hang out sometime.